When I first stepped off the plane at Heathrow and dragged my ridiculously oversized American suitcases into my new flat, I thought my biggest adjustment was going to be learning how to use an electric kettle or figuring out what on earth a Guinness was. But a few months into living in the UK, I was walking home from a local pub at around 11 p.m. It was dark, a light drizzle was falling, and the street was almost completely empty. In the US, my keys would have been woven between my knuckles like a weapon. My phone would have been in my hand, thumb hovered over the emergency call button. My eyes would have been scanning every shadow, every parked car, calculating the exact distance between me and the nearest open store. But as I walked down that quiet British street, I suddenly realized something that stopped me dead in my tracks. My shoulders were down, my hands were relaxed in my pockets. The constant buzzing bass line of anxiety that had hummed in the back of my mind for my entire life was completely quiet. I was literally shocked. That was the exact moment I realized I had been carrying an invisible backpack of fear for nearly 30 years, and I had only just taken it off. Moving to the UK did not just change my address. It completely rewrote everything I thought I knew about fear, freedom, and security. In the United States, we are conditioned from childhood to accept a highly specific, hyper-vigilant way of living. We do not even notice it because it is the water we swim in. From the time you are 6 years old, you participate in active shooter drills. You learn to huddle in the corner of a classroom, away from the windows, keeping absolutely silent while your teacher locks the heavy door. In the UK, children do not do this. They do fire drills. That is a fundamental difference in how your brain is wired to perceive the world from a young age. When you grow up with that baseline level of threat, your relationship with public spaces changes. You go to a movie theater and you look for the exits. You go to a grocery store and you mentally map out where you would run if the worst happened. When I first moved here, I caught myself doing this in a supermarket in Manchester. I was standing in the bakery aisle and my brain was running its usual safety calculations. Then I looked around at the people around me. They were just casually deciding between sourdough and crumpets. Nobody was hyper-vigilant. Nobody was scanning the crowd. It felt like stepping into an alternate reality where the worst-case scenario was not constantly lurking around the corner. In the US, security is often viewed as something you have to buy and defend individually. We build gated communities. We install massive security cameras on every surface. We buy bulletproof backpacks for our kids. We believe that we are solely responsible for our own physical protection, which creates a highly defensive, slightly paranoid culture. In the UK, physical security feels like a collective, shared agreement. The front yards, or gardens as they call them here, rarely have massive security gates. Instead, they have low brick walls or simple hedges that anyone could step over. People leave their curtains open in the evenings, exposing their brightly lit living rooms to the street. In the US, we would never leave our blinds wide open at night. It feels like an invitation for danger. But here, there is a level of social trust that feels almost completely foreign to an American. Walking home at night, even in busy cities like London or Birmingham, feels fundamentally different because of the lack of guns. It is not that crime does not exist in the UK. Of course it does. People get their phones snatched by kids on e-bikes all the time. But the absolute worst-case outcome of a bad encounter is rarely lethal. That shifts your entire nervous system out of fight or flight mode. It is a type of freedom that is incredibly hard to explain until you actually feel it in your body. Quick thing before we dive into the next major shift in my perspective, which completely blew my mind. The data on this channel shows that over 80% of you watching right now are actually not subscribed. That means you are showing up for these stories, but the algorithm has no reason to show you the next video. Hit subscribe so you do not miss the next one. Let's talk about existential security because this is where the real culture shock hit me. In the United States, your physical safety is one thing, but your financial survival is a constant, low-lying terror. We have all grown up knowing that a single accident, a bad diagnosis, or a sudden layoff that strips away your employer-provided health insurance can literally destroy your life. Medical debt is the #1 cause of bankruptcy in America. Think about how insane that is. You can work hard, save money, do everything right, and then get sick and lose everything. When I lived in the US, I had decent corporate health insurance, but I still dreaded going to the doctor. I would spend hours trying to figure out if a specialist was in-network. I had to calculate co-pays, deductibles, and out-of-pocket maximums. I once got a bill for hundreds of dollars just for a routine blood test because the lab itself was considered out of network, even though the doctor who ordered it was in network. When I moved to the UK, I had to register with a local general practitioner, or GP. The first time I needed an appointment, I was absolutely terrified of what it was going to cost. I walked into the clinic, had my consultation, got a prescription, and then stood at the reception desk waiting to pay. I pulled out my credit card and asked how much I owed. The receptionist looked at me like I had two heads and said, "Nothing, you are all set." I stood there, completely frozen, trying to figure out where the catch was. Was I going to get a massive bill in the mail? Was my visa going to be cancelled because I did not pay? But there was no bill. The NHS, despite all of its very real funding challenges and long wait times, is free at the point of use. To put this into perspective, the United States spends around $14,800 per capita on healthcare annually, which is twice as much as other wealthy nations. The UK spends about $6,700 per person. Yet, in the US, millions of people remain uninsured or underinsured, constantly living with the fear that their health will bankrupt them. In the UK, that fear simply does not exist. Yes, people complain about the NHS constantly. It is practically a national sport here. And yes, if you have a non-urgent issue, you might have to wait weeks or even months to see a specialist. But the baseline security of knowing that if you break your leg, get into a car accident, or get diagnosed with a serious illness, you will be treated without losing your home is a monumental relief. It changes how you view your future. It allows you to take risks. You can start a business, change careers, or take a sabbatical without the paralyzing fear of losing your health coverage. In the US, we call ourselves the land of the free, but are you really free if you are chained to a job you hate just because you cannot afford to lose your health insurance? Moving here taught me that true security is not about having a high-paying job with gold-tier insurance. It is about living in a society that decides your life is worth saving, regardless of your bank balance. Also, this is exactly the kind of thing I go much deeper on with the people who support this channel directly. So if you are sitting there thinking, okay, I need the fuller version of this story, join the membership below. That is where I share the deeper thoughts, the more personal side of all this, and the extra bits I cannot always fit into the main videos. It is an amazing way for us to connect on a much more personal level. This brings me to the idea of freedom of movement, which has a completely different meaning in the UK compared to back home. In America, we associate freedom with the open road. We think of the car as the ultimate symbol of liberty, but the reality is that we are actually prisoners of our cars. In most American suburbs and cities, you cannot do anything without a vehicle. If you want a gallon of milk, you have to drive. If you want to go to a park, you have to drive. If your teenagers want to see their friends, you have to drive them. We have built a world of car dependency where pavements do not exist, public transit is practically non-existent or highly stigmatized, and walking is viewed as a suspicious activity. When I moved to the UK, I sold my car. I was terrified of how I would survive without it, but what I discovered was a level of daily freedom that I had never experienced before. I can walk out of my front door and reach 3 different grocery stores, 5 cafes, a library, and 2 train stations within 10 minutes. I do not have to worry about traffic, parking, gas prices, or car insurance. My daily commute is not a stressful crawl on a 6-lane highway. It is a walk through a park. I see my neighbors, I watch the seasons change, and I feel connected to my community. And this freedom extends to children and teenagers in a way that absolutely shocked me. The first time I rode the London Underground or hopped on a double-decker bus in the afternoon, I saw groups of 11 and 12-year-olds in school uniforms travelling completely unsupervised. They were laughing, chatting, buying snacks, and navigating the public transport system with total confidence. In the US, parents are often terrified to let their kids out of their sight. We worry about traffic, abduction, and the lack of safe pedestrian spaces. American kids are essentially under house arrest until they get their driver's license at 16, entirely dependent on their parents to chaperone them everywhere. In the UK, children have the freedom to develop independence, navigation skills, and social confidence at a much younger age. That is a massive form of freedom that we have sacrificed in the US in favour of car-centric urban design. Now, we also need to talk about another mind-blowing concept that simply does not exist in the US, and that is the right to roam. In America, private property is sacred. If you walk onto someone's land, you are a trespasser. We have giant yellow signs warning people that trespassers will be prosecuted. And in many states, landowners are legally protected if they use force to defend their property. Nature is essentially locked behind gates, fences, and high fees. In the UK, specifically in England and Wales, they have the Countryside and Rights of Way Act, and in Scotland, they have an even more expansive right to roam. This means you have a legal right to walk across private land, mountains, moors, heaths, and downs. There are thousands of miles of public footpaths that cut directly through private farms, estates, and fields. You can walk through a farmer's field of sheep, climb over a stile, and walk right past a historic manor house. As long as you follow the Countryside Code, which basically means do not litter, leave gates as you find them, and keep your dog on a lead, you are welcome. The land is viewed as a shared heritage, not just private commodity. When I first went hiking in the Peak District, I was constantly waiting for someone to scream at me to get off their property. But it never happened. Instead, farmers would just nod and say morning as I walked past. It is an incredible feeling of freedom to know that the beauty of the country is open to everyone, not just the wealthy people who own the land. Let us shift gears to the freedom to actually live your life, which is heavily tied to how we work. In the United States, we have a hustle culture that is practically a religion. We wear our exhaustion like a badge of honor. We work long hours, check our emails on weekends, and feel immense guilt for taking even a single day off. And the system is designed to keep us on this hamster wheel. Did you know that the United States is the only advanced economy in the world that does not legally guarantee paid vacation days for its workers? Not one single day is federally mandated. Yes, many corporate jobs offer 2 weeks of paid time off, but that is a benefit, not a right, and taking it often comes with unspoken professional penalties. In the UK, full-time workers are legally entitled to a minimum of 28 days of paid annual leave per year under the working time regulations. Let that sink in. Nearly 6 weeks of paid time off is the legal baseline. And here is the kicker. People actually take it. In fact, your manager will actively hassle you if you do not use your holiday allowance by the end of the year. When I first started working with British colleagues, I noticed a massive shift in how they talked about time off. They did not apologize for going on holiday. They did not put a disclaimer in their out-of-office email saying they would be checking messages periodically. They completely shut down. They went to Spain, Greece, or Cornwall, turned off their work phones, and genuinely disconnected. In the US, we are constantly terrified of being seen as replaceable. We think that if we take a 2-week vacation, our company will realize they do not need us, or we will fall so far behind that the stress of returning is not worth the time off. But in the UK, work-life balance is a protected right. It is not viewed as a lazy luxury. It is understood that rest makes you a better, healthier, and more productive human being. Moving here taught me that my worth is not defined by my productivity. It gave me the freedom to exist outside of my professional identity, to explore hobbies, to travel, and to spend quality time with the people I love without a crushing cloud of work guilt hanging over my head. If you are loving this journey and want to see more content like this, take a quick second to hype up this video. Smash the like button, write a comment, share your thoughts, and let the algorithm know we are building an amazing community here. It really shows your support and love, which means everything to me and helps me keep bringing these honest stories to you. So what does all of this add up to? When you combine physical safety, financial security through healthcare, freedom of movement, and protected time to rest, something fascinating happens to your brain. You experience a total psychological decompression. When I lived in America, I did not realize how much energy I was spending just managing my baseline anxiety. I was constantly on alert. I was worried about my safety, my finances, my health, my career, and my future. I thought that this was just what it meant to be an adult. I thought everyone felt this way. But after living in the UK for a couple of years, I realized that high-octane anxiety is not a natural human state. It is a product of a system that thrives on insecurity. In the UK, the collective consciousness is much more relaxed. People complain absolutely. They moan about the weather, the trains, the government, and the price of pints. But beneath all the grumbling, there is a fundamental sense of stability. People know that the basic pillars of their lives are relatively secure. This allows them to approach life with a different attitude. They do not need to be constantly striving, constantly fighting, or constantly defensive. They can just exist. Moving here taught me that freedom is not about the absence of government or the right to do whatever you want, whenever you want, regardless of how it affects others. That is a highly individualistic, isolating form of freedom. True freedom is the ability to live your life without being paralyzed by fear. It is the freedom to walk down the street at night without checking your surroundings. It is the freedom to get sick without worrying about bankruptcy. It is the freedom to explore nature without being shot at for trespassing. It is the freedom to rest without guilt. When I look back at the person I was before I moved to the UK, I barely recognize her. I was so wound up, so defensive, and so tired. Living here has softened me. It has taught me to trust my community, to value my peace of mind over my productivity, and to realize that a society that cares for its most vulnerable is a society where everyone is genuinely safer and more free. It is not a perfect country by any means. The winters are long and grey, the bureaucracy can be incredibly frustrating, and the cost of living crisis is very real. But the lessons in fear, freedom, and security that I have learned here are things I will carry with me for the rest of my life. They have completely changed how I want to live, how I want to raise a family, and what I expect from the world around me. And for that, I will be forever grateful to this rainy, beautiful island.